It continually amazes me how Marvel can perfectly streamline and replicate the magic of reading comics on the silver screen. Being able to keep a singular continuity running for over 8 years now, keeping an audience interested and invested in the continuing ongoings of its universe, and making sure that they watch everything so they don't have to continually recap things in each successive movie, seems like something that would only work for an audience as hardcore as comic book nerds. Yet year after year, Marvel is able to completely destroy the box office with hit after hit using a simplified model of what they use for their comics. While I personally find comics a bit too insane to attempt to keep up with, since there are hundreds of releases a year that all intertwine, and with so many creative cooks in the kitchen that continuity quickly begins to contradict itself, Marvel's cinematic universe instead only has 2 or 3 releases a year, with a single guy, Kevin Feige, calling all the major shots, making sure the continuity stays focused. It's amazing how these two changes open up this model to such a larger audience. The reason I'm stating this is that because Captain America Civil War is the culmination of this strategy, and the poster child for its merits. This is a film that is completely unapproachable from a narrative perspective to anyone coming in not having seen all the previous Marvel films, and yet it's being released to rave reviews and massive sales because Marvel has roped in the entire movie-going public into its world. What was once the realm of the nerd has now been unquestionably pushed into the mainstream. Everyone is a superhero nerd now. And that's not even going into the insane balancing act going on in this story. Gone are the days when a Captain America movie was just about Captain America. Nearly everyone in the MCU is present in Civil War, along with introducing Black Panther to moviegoers and the fantastic, long overdue debut of an MCU Spider-Man. Yet, despite all this going on at once, the story never feels bloated or spread too thin. And this is again completely thanks to the continuous, ever-compounding narrative of the MCU, letting all of the runtime of this movie be dedicated to telling its story and its story alone, and trusting the audience to know who all the players are and what their relationships with each other are like. It's almost embarrassing how DC built up the release of Batman v Superman, getting everyone hyped for its big title match between two of its biggest names to kickstart its own cinematic universe, only to have it trip at the starting line. Then a few months later, Marvel comes in with its scheduled release for the summer, same as it's been doing for years, and just utterly mops the floor with DC on every conceivable level, while ironically exploring a lot of the same themes BVS attempted to tackle with infinitely more tact and effectiveness. Both films put superheroes against each other, but while Luthor, Batman, and Superman have literally no concrete reason for their conflict aside from make the fanboys happy, from the word go, Civil War frames the conflict between Steve and Tony in a believable human manner, even contextualizing events from past Marvel films to add fuel to the fire. What begins as a clash of ideologies quickly narrows to a more personal vendetta, the tension between Cap and Tony present ever since the first Avengers finally coming to a head here, and the events of the film itself only continuing to keep the conflict deepening. Despite that though, Civil War wisely never paints either side as good or bad, both sides having their merits and shortcomings, and while it's a Captain America movie and you can be reasonably sure that Cap has the right idea in the end, there are times when it's clear Steve is making some uncomfortable calls in the pursuit of his ideals. A lot of the appeal of these movies comes from the fantastic action sequences, and Civil War knocks it out of the park in that regard, with a great rhythm of high-energy action sequences contrasted with calm discussions between the characters that only raise the tension higher by the time the next fight scene starts. Instead of the Avengers versus a baddie, we instead get to see how all these characters fight with each other, and makes for some high-energy action sequences that will probably be the highlight of the summer in terms of action scenes. The biggest draw for me to this movie was the promise of Spider-Man, a character I've loved since I was 5, finally taking his place in the MCU after some shaky silver screen representation. From the very second Tom Holland first appears on screen, I was completely sold that this was the Peter Parker I grew up with, something I never believed with Tobey Maguire, and while I thought Andrew Garfield made a great Spider-Man, the films he was dropped into left a bit to be desired. Holland's has no such handicap, giving fans of the webhead his best portrayal since Spectacular Spider-Man was cancelled criminally early. Whether stumbling over his words as Peter or wisecracking to everyone's dismay around him as Spidey, I can say without question that Holland's solo film is something I'm looking forward to more than I dared hope for going in, on the other side of seeing Civil War. Likewise, Black Panther is fantastically brought to life here too. I'm far less familiar with his character, but I loved his role in this movie, and his arc made me excited for a solo film if that ever happens. Also, between his costume and Deadpool's, Marvel is starting to get terrifyingly good at bringing superhero costumes into real life and not having it look even at all awkward. Black Panther's mask looked like it leaped right off a comic book page. I'd like to talk more about, the actual plot of this movie, but going into any detail would move into spoiler territory, and I'd be remiss if I ruined anything here. What I will say is while the plot may be a bit more blockbuster than The Winter Soldier and less intelligent as a result, the story is still engaging, deeply emotional, and plays to the relationships we've built with these characters perfectly, delivering what can only be described as a perfect night at the movies. My critical faculties are pretty much shot beyond that. I know people are talking a lot about the inevitable collapse of the superhero genre due to oversaturation, but as someone who has loved superheroes my entire life, I can't get enough of the MCU, and I hope it keeps going for years to come. I love this film, I love seeing Spider-Man, and I love seeing some of my favorite characters in fiction continue to be given the respect they deserve. If you're up to date on the MCU, go see Civil War. You won't regret it. If you haven't gotten on the Marvel train yet, now is the perfect time to get started. Thanks for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Give it a thumbs up if you thought it was good, or give it a thumbs down if you thought it friggin' sucked. Also, I want to give a shout out to my patrons for letting me keep making videos like this one. If you want to help support me, I'd appreciate you becoming a patron as well. You get some cool stuff, and you let me make sure I have food for eating. You know, money. Kick ass food. You know how it works. I'm sure you do it too. Until next time, I'm Tommy Oliver. Stay curious. Like you can, though it don't matter 'cause you understand.